Gloria walked into the kitchen early in the morning, ready to prepare breakfast. She was thinking of making a simple cup of tea to start the day. As she entered, she was surprised to find her mother-in-law already there, standing by the gars and stirring a pot of soup. "Good morning, Mom," Gloria greeted cheerfully. "I didn't expect to see you up so early. What are you making?" Her mother-in-law turned around, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Oh, Gloria, good morning. I'm making some soup for lunch. What are you doing in the kitchen so early?" "I just wanted to make some tea for breakfast," Gloria replied, opening the cupboard to get the teapot. Her mother-in-law's face suddenly twisted with an unexpected emotion. She placed a hand on her chest, and to Gloria's shock, her eyes filled with tears. "So, you think I'm a witch?" she said, her voice quivering. "You don't want to eat the food I'm preparing for you because you think it's cursed or something." Gloria stood there, stunned. "What? No, I never said that," she exclaimed, putting the teapot down and taking a step closer to her mother-in-law. "I just wanted to make some tea. I didn't mean anything by it." But her mother-in-law shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to lie to me, Gloria. I can see it in your eyes. You think I'm trying to harm you. That's why you don't want to eat my food." Gloria felt a wave of frustration and confusion. She took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Mom, please listen to me. I do not think you're a witch, and I never said anything like that. I appreciate everything you do for us, including making this soup. I was just in the mood for some tea this morning." Her mother-in-law continued to cry, shaking her head as if she couldn't hear Gloria's words. "You don't trust me," she murmured. "You don't want to eat what I make. You don't respect me." Gloria felt tears of her own welling up. "Mom, I do trust you. I respect you so much. I'm grateful for all the love and care you show us. Please don't cry. Let's have breakfast together, and I'll make you a cup of tea too." Max came into the kitchen. He found his mother, Martha, leaning against the counter, her face streaked with tears. She kept repeating, "She called me a witch, Max. She called me a witch." Gloria stood across the room, her face a mask of shock and hurt. She tried to approach Max, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Max, please, let me explain." But Max was too furious to listen. Without a second thought, he swung his hand and slapped Gloria hard across the face. The sound echoed in the tense silence of the kitchen. "How dare you insult my mother?" he roared, his voice shaking with rage. "You will never speak to her like that again. Do you hear me?" Gloria stumbled back, clutching her cheek in disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched Max turn his back on her. She wanted to scream, to make him understand that she had never called his mother a witch, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, but the words were caught in her throat. Max gently took his mother's arm. "Come on, Mom, let's get you out of here," he said, his voice softening as he guided her out of the kitchen. Martha clung to her son, still sobbing, while Gloria stood frozen, feeling the weight of the accusation and the sting of the slap. As the door swung shut behind them, Gloria sank to the floor, her mind racing. She knew she had to find a way to make Max see the truth, but for now, all she could do was weep for the broken trust and the pain of the moment. Max's mother, Agnes, rushed to the door. Someone was knocking. When she opened the door, there stood Genevieve, a young woman of striking beauty and gentle demeanor. Her long auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of nervousness. She wore a modest yet elegant dress, perfect for making a good impression. "Hello, Ma," Genevieve said softly, offering a polite smile. "Thank you for inviting me." Agnes smiled warmly, though her mind was racing with thoughts of how this meeting might go. She had been determined to find a suitable partner for her son, Max, especially after the heartbreaking realization that Gloria, Max's wife, couldn't bear children. Agnes's longing for grandchildren had driven her to take matters into her own hands, a decision that weighed heavily on her conscience. "Please, come in, Genevieve," Agnes said, stepping aside to let her in. In the living room, Max was sitting on the couch, his thoughts elsewhere. He looked up as Genevieve entered, his eyes widening in surprise. He stood up awkwardly, unsure of what to say or do. "Max, this is Genevieve," his mother introduced them, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "She's the young lady I've been telling you about." Genevieve smiled, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Max." Max shook her hand, his grip firm but his eyes searching hers. "Nice to meet you too, Genevieve." There was a moment of silence, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Agnes, sensing the awkwardness, decided to break the ice. "Why don't we all sit down and get to know each other a bit?" she suggested, gesturing towards the couches. As they sat down, Agnes began to talk, weaving a narrative of shared interests and possibilities. She spoke of Genevieve's love for the arts, her volunteer work, and her gentle nature. Max listened, nodding occasionally, but his mind was still on Gloria. Genevieve, sensing his hesitation, spoke up. "I know this must be difficult for you, Max. I understand how much you love Gloria, and I'm not here to replace her. I just want to help in any way I can." Her words, sincere and heartfelt, seemed to reach Max. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "Thank you, Genevieve," he said quietly. "I appreciate your offer, but I don't think we need help." Agnes watched them, a mixture of hope and worry in her heart. She knew this journey wouldn't be easy, but seeing the beginnings of a connection gave her a glimmer of hope. They could find a way through this together. Mrs. Agnes, with her characteristic warmth, smiled at Genevieve. "Feel at home, dear. If you need anything, just let me know," she said, patting Genevieve's shoulder reassuringly. Genevieve nodded, trying to suppress her unease. This was a new environment for her, and though Mrs. Agnes was welcoming, she couldn't ignore the tension simmering in the household. Max, on the other hand, stood at the window, staring out into the garden with a furrowed brow. His mind was a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. He was still seething from Gloria's accusation that his mother was a witch. It was an outrageous claim, one that hurt him deeply. How could Gloria, his wife, say something so malicious? He had loved her deeply and couldn't fathom how their relationship had reached this point of distrust and bitterness. Yet, as much as he was angry with Gloria, the idea of marrying Genevieve was something he couldn't stomach. His mother's insistence on bringing Genevieve into their home only added to his turmoil. He couldn't just set aside his marriage vows because Gloria hadn't been able to give him a child. It wasn't fair to either of them. Max turned away from the window and looked at Genevieve, who was sitting awkwardly on the couch, twiddling her fingers. He felt a pang of guilt. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. Taking a deep breath, he walked over to her and sat down. "Genevieve," he began softly, "I know this situation is difficult for you. It's difficult for all of us. But I want you to know that whatever happens, I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. This isn't your fault." Genevieve looked up at him, her eyes filled with relief. "Thank you, Max," she replied quietly. "I just want to help in any way I can. I don't want to cause any more problems." Mrs. Agnes, who had been silently observing their conversation, interjected gently. "Max, you need to talk to Gloria. Clear the air. Running away from this won't solve anything. You need to confront the real issues in your marriage." Gloria had been alone in the room, her eyes swollen from crying. The pain in her chest was unbearable. The betrayal from Max's mother was a heavy weight on her heart. She couldn't fathom how someone could be so cunning and determined to ruin her image before her husband. The memories of the accusations and the cold, calculating look in Max's mother's eyes replayed in her mind like a haunting melody. Suddenly, voices drifted from the sitting room, breaking the silence of her sorrow. Curiosity pushed her to her feet. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and slowly opened the door. As she stepped into the sitting room, her heart stopped. There, on the couch, sat Max and Genevieve. They were close, too close. Genevieve's hand was on Max's arm, and they were talking in low tones. Gloria felt a rush of emotions, shock, confusion, and a burning sense of betrayal. "Max?" she called. Max looked up, startled. His eyes met hers, and for a moment guilt flashed across his face before he masked it with a neutral expression. Genevieve, on the other hand, didn't bother to hide her smirk. "Gloria," Max said, standing up but not moving towards her. "We need to talk." She couldn't move, lifted to the spot by the sheer absurdity of the situation. "What is she doing here?" she managed to ask. Genevieve rose gracefully, her expression turning from a smirk to one of feigned concern. "Oh, Gloria, I was just comforting Max. He's been so stressed with everything that's been happening." "Comforting him?" Gloria repeated, her voice rising. "Max, what is going on here?" Max sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Gloria, it's not what it looks like. Genevieve came over because Mum invited her. I was just telling her that we don't need help. Really? Gloria's voice cracked. By sitting so close to you, by touching you like that. Genevieve stepped forward, her eyes glinting with a mixture of pity and triumph. Gloria, maybe if you weren't so emotional, you'd see that Max needs support right now. His mother is very upset with you and it's been hard on him. Gloria's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she refused to let them fall. Max, you promised me. You said we would face everything together. Max looked conflicted. I don't know what to believe anymore, Gloria. My mother said... Your mother lied, Gloria interrupted, her voice breaking. She's trying to destroy us, can't you see that? Genevieve placed a hand on Max's shoulder, her touch gentle but possessive. Max, you need to think about what's best for you, for your family. Gloria felt as if the ground was slipping away beneath her feet. She took a step back, her heart shattering with each passing second. Max, please, she pleaded, don't let her come between us. Gloria, I need some time to think. The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked at Max, hoping for any sign of the love they once shared, but all she saw was doubt and confusion. Mrs. Agnes offered to show Genevieve her room, and both Max and Gloria shouted in surprise. Her room? Gloria turned to Max. Is she going to stay in this house? She asked, eyes wide with concern. Before Max could respond, Mrs. Agnes had already taken Genevieve by the hand and was leading her to a room. Come along, dear. Let me show you your room. Make yourself at home and don't bother yourself with anything, Mrs. Agnes said warmly. Genevieve followed, her apprehension fading with each step. Mrs. Agnes's reassuring presence made her feel welcome, despite the tension she sensed from Max and Gloria. They arrived at a quaint room in the house. The room was bathed in soft natural light from a large window overlooking the garden. It was simply furnished. This is where you'll be staying, Mrs. Agnes said with a smile. I hope you find it comfortable. Genevieve looked around, touched by the cozy setup. Thank you, Mum. This is more than I could have asked for. You're welcome, dear. Now rest if you need to. Dinner will be ready in a couple of hours, Mrs. Agnes said, gently patting Genevieve's shoulder before leaving the room. As Mrs. Agnes returned to the living room, she found Max and Gloria in a hushed but heated discussion. She approached them calmly. Yes, Genevieve will be staying here from now, she affirmed. Max's mother had a habit of painting a narrative that evoked sympathy and pity. She would often tell Max that Gloria would lock up the kitchen, leaving her hungry and helpless. At first, Max was skeptical, but his mother's consistent tales began to sow seeds of doubt in his mind. He started to believe that Gloria was indeed capable of such cruelty. As time passed, Max found himself growing distant from his wife. He began to question her intentions and felt a growing sense of resentment towards her. Meanwhile, Genevieve sensed his vulnerability and started offering a listening ear and comforting words. She would often remind Max of his worth and how he deserved better. Genevieve's subtle manipulations and empathetic nature slowly but surely drew Max in. He found himself confiding in her more and more, sharing his doubts and fears. Before long, Max found himself emotionally entangled with Genevieve. She had successfully created a rift between Max and Gloria, and it seemed only a matter of time before their marriage would crumble. The once strong bond between Max and Gloria was now frayed, all due to the insidious lies and machinations of Max's mother and the cunning Genevieve. Gloria's food sat untouched. She has been in a deep thought for days. The grand house, once a symbol of Max's affection, felt like a gilded cage. Every corner whispered accusations. Every polished surface reflected a stranger staring back. The truth, a monstrous weight in her chest, finally sank its teeth deeper. It wasn't just the emptiness in her womb that gnawed at her. It was the absence of a tiny hand that used to reach for hers, the echo of a giggle forever silenced. The memory of her late daughter slammed into her with the force of a tidal wave. Gloria had sacrificed a life for a future that, in a cruel twist of fate, seemed as ephemeral as smoke. Max, once the object of her desperate yearning, now appeared distant, almost transparent. The fear, a dull ember all these years, flared into an inferno. He could choose again, replace her with a woman who could bear him a child. But her daughter? There was no replacing her. The tears, long dammed by guilt and denial, finally burst forth, a torrent of grief that threatened to drown her whole. Max was very happy when Genevieve revealed she was pregnant. He couldn't wait to share the news with his mother, who had always wanted him to have a child. He rushed to his mother, with Genevieve by his side, and broke the news. His mother was overjoyed, beaming with pride and excitement. As they celebrated in the sitting room, Gloria walked in, her eyes fixed on the scene before her. She saw Max, the man she loved, embracing another woman, their faces radiant with joy. She felt a pang in her heart, knowing she had been pushed aside. Without a word, Gloria turned back into the room, her eyes welling up with tears. She quickly packed her bags, her mind made up. Max called out to her as she tried to leave. "Why are you leaving, Gloria? We can all live as one big happy family," he said. Gloria turned to him. "I've been like a stranger in this house for a long time, Max, and I know it will only get worse if I stay. I deserve better than to be pushed aside for another woman." With that, she walked out of the house, leaving Max and Genevieve to their new life. Max's mother, still basking in the joy of becoming a grandmother, didn't seem to notice the pain she had helped create. As the door closed behind Gloria, Max felt a pang of guilt. But it was too late. The damage was done, and Gloria was gone. Gloria walked through the quiet streets, her heart heavy with grief and regret. She finally reached the cemetery and made her way to her daughter's grave. As she stood before the headstone, she fell to her knees, tears filled her eyes. "Emily, my dear child, forgive me," she pleaded, her voice cracking with sorrow. "I was so blind, so stupid and naive. I thought you were the problem, and I took your precious life. Oh, Emily, I realize now that you were a priceless gift, and I can never get you back." Gloria wept uncontrollably, overcome by the weight of her guilt and regret. She stayed there for hours, pouring out her heart to her daughter. That night, Gloria returned home, exhausted but with a sense of resolve. She fell into a deep sleep, and in her dream, she saw Emily, her beautiful daughter, standing before her. Emily's gentle hands reached out, and she wiped away Gloria's tears. Gloria woke up with a start, feeling a sense of peace. She would strive to be a better person. And though the pain of her loss would always remain, she would learn to live with it and find a way to heal.